Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I'm doing great. As you can see, I've got my couch now, so I can just sit here and do videos like this, which I am so happy about. So for anybody who is new to my channel or just hasn't really watched enough of my videos to know that I work in property management. I'm a leasing consultant. I've worked in property management before when I lived in Texas and I got fired. The featured video on my channel is called My Stalker Got Me Fired, A Tale of Bullshittery. You should watch that video if you haven't, because that's some necessary backstory about me. Because I got fired for a really stupid fucking reason. So working in industries like property management or the service industry, which is both what I've done, you run into a lot of like really crazy fucking people. And so today I just wanted to tell you some of the stories of the peculiar people that I've encountered while being in property management, because man, there's been some fun happenings. I'm gonna start with the crazies that are at the current place that I'm at, because we have a couple of them. The first one is this lady. She's older, she's probably in her 60s. This lady and her son, who I thought were a couple in the beginning, and I was just kind of creeped out. I was just like, that's a really weird dynamic. But later he came to the office and kept saying, my mom said this, my mom said that, and I was like, oh, that's your mom, okay, it's not weird. About a month after I started working here, I leased an apartment to this mom and her grown son. Like, mom's in her 60s, son has a kid, and kid lives with them. They have to get housing help from the government, so like Section 8 or Council for the Homeless, something like that. So it was hard to qualify them in the beginning, and oh my god, it was so difficult to like get their proof of income. The Council for the Homeless like pays for a portion of their rent, so we have to calculate what portion that the resident is responsible and like qualify them for that, because you have to make at least 3 times your portion of the rent. And so it was like pulling teeth to get this fucking person to get us proof of income, because the son was getting a job and all we needed was an offer letter, and we stated it like in writing so many times, we need your offer letter from your employer. It has to be on official company letterhead. They sent me an email from an email that is not associated with a company, didn't talk about the company. It was just an email that said this person works for me, and then signed the person's name, but it didn't say like what the company was or like what he made or like when he started the job. And so I responded back to them and was like, company letterhead, and like I couldn't get anybody to answer me, so I had to actually call the employer myself and be like, hey, sorry to bug you, just this process is taking a really long time and this is what I need, all right? It needs to be on official company letterhead. I need this information. And he was like, all right, cool. And then he sent over an editable Word document with the same thing that it said inside the fucking email. And I was just like, I had to deal with them again and, you know, get them to finally send me something that wasn't an editable Word document that didn't have anything to do with the company. And the mom came in and was like giving me all sorts of grief, talking about,
well, if all you need is a letter on official company letterhead, like anybody could forge that. Like, you can't just call and ask.
She kept reiterating the point that like anybody could forge that. Like, what's the point? She could say anything she wants. I'm like, okay, but the point is we need that so that if we get audited, we show that we did our part to get proof of income and everything. And if you're lying to us, that's on you, all right? That's not on us. It was a nightmare to deal with just in getting them approved and moved in, everything for the apartment. Their lease signing, typically it takes anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to do a lease sign, because, you know, people will like ask questions. It's a 39-page document, so like there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. I kept trying to get them to schedule an appointment to come in and sign it because of the fact that it takes so long to sign a lease. And I was like, I need to know, like, it takes this long, so I need to know when you're gonna come in. And then they told me that they were gonna come in the morning on this day, and then they didn't show up until 30 minutes before we were closing. It is okay to have questions about the lease, but to argue about things in the lease, it's like, I can't change the lease. It's the lease. It's not gonna fucking change. That's how it is. You either accept it and sign it and you can take the apartment, or you don't sign it and you don't get the apartment. Like that's just how it is. And so she kept like trying to argue with me on like tons of different little points, and I was just so fucking exhausted. And then when we got to the apartment, so they rented a 2-bedroom apartment, and the model that we have to show everybody is a 1-bedroom apartment, which is same floor plan as a 2-bedroom, but it's a little bit different because it has the extra bedroom and like the washer dryer is different and the kitchen is slightly different. But like I explained all of the differences to her, the fact that she'd be losing counter space in the kitchen because the kitchen is different, it's a little bit smaller, and like she seemed to understand that. And then I have it in writing in an email too to like reiterate that to her. And so before we signed the lease, they wanted to look at the apartment. We went and looked into the apartment and she's just standing there and she's just like,
well, the kitchen is so much smaller. Like, you didn't say that it would be like this.
And I was literally like, yes, I did. And she was just so focused on the fact that the kitchen wasn't as big as the 1-bedroom, because the kitchen in the 1-bedroom is significantly bigger. But I mean, I'm in a 2-bedroom floor plan here. There was another video that I did, I don't know, but I did an apartment tour of what I have, and like the kitchen space is perfectly fucking fine for a 2-bedroom. Like, it's still a lot of counter space. It's just not as much as in the 1-bedroom. I don't know why they designed it that way. They just did, all right? This apartment complex is like almost 30 years old. So she's standing in there bitching about the kitchen and like just taking her sweet ass time, just complaining about the kitchen like there's anything I can do about the kitchen. And she was like, well, can we go back and see the kitchen in the model? I was like, we can. But whenever we were in the model, like I explained that to you. I told you that you were gonna have a third of this counter space, that it goes away, and that this counter space is slightly smaller, and these drawers go from being 3 drawers into 2 drawers. Like, because I explained that to literally fucking everybody. She expected the apartment to be like brand new, like nobody had ever lived in it before. I'm like, we do a pretty good job of turning the apartment, and you know, they got new carpet, they got new vinyl in all of the wet areas, she got new appliances. She got as close to a new apartment as she could. But I don't understand why people get on this thing where they think that they're just gonna get brand new shit. It's like, no, it's an apartment complex. You are not buying a house right now. You can be super fucking picky about small shit like that when you're buying a house. That's different than living in an apartment, all right? It just is. Just please stop being so fucking picky. So her entire move-in process, lease signing process, getting her approved was a fucking nightmare. And now that she has moved in and she's lived here for a little while, she is causing so much drama. I don't know if she has something going on with her mentally, but she's got some issues, and you know, I feel for her. Like, I'm sorry that she has whatever issues she has, but the people that live below her, who have lived with us for quite a while, are telling us that they don't want to live here anymore because of how bad that they are being. The neighbors down below have a little security camera that they've installed on top of their garage that just faces the parking lot, and the upstairs neighbor's garage is like right next to there. So like if they come in and out of their garage, you can see like their vehicle go in the garage and like the top of her head if she's walking to the garage, but like you can't really see anything. And then also they have a camera at their front door. So the way that it's set up is they have their own private front patio. They have their camera looking at the bottom of the stairs. Like it can see the sidewalk and the bottom of the stairs. So if anybody goes up the stairs, they can see like their ankles and their feet for like 3 steps, and that's it. So it really only comes on if somebody walks up to the door, and it has a little blue like LED light. This bitch thinks that they are being spied on. She's like, they're taking pictures of me. Every single time I come home, they're taking pictures of me, and I can see the flash goes off. And she's gone to their door and like banged on their door, being this paranoid crazy bitch, talking about they're spying on her. And we have mediated the situation, and we've gotten footage from the cameras and showed her that they're not spying on her. It caught her full on camera when she went up to the door and was banging on the door. But whenever they come home, all you can see is their feet. She thinks that they're like monitoring her coming and going. They're like, we literally don't give a shit about you coming and going. Like, I don't know why you think you're so important. They got those cameras because they've had a couple of packages stolen from their front door. And so they have that to monitor, and they are perfectly within their rights to do that. We had so many fucking arguments. They are allowed to have those. We had him adjust the camera so it went up just a little bit on the garage one so it can see even less of her, and we got him to put tape over the blue LED lights so that she can't see a flash. Like, there's no flash on it. It literally is just the blue LED like sensor. She comes into the office and she's standing in the middle between my office and my boss's office, and she is going on and on and on about these cameras, and my boss is laughing at her going like, we've had this conversation, they're allowed to have those cameras, they're not spying on you, like, we've been through this, you need to quit. And then she starts talking about how she has a stalker, something about her stalker knowing where she lives and like coming in and doing stuff. I don't know, but like, if you have a stalker and they're like coming to your apartment, wouldn't you want someone to have the footage of that so that you can prove that this person is stalking you? I really don't understand her train of thought and why she's bringing up this stalker and whatever. And I've had stalkers before. I understand how scary that can be. But you know what I wanted when I had a stalker? A fucking camera to prove that the motherfucker was doing creepy shit. She was talking about her stalker, and so then I brought up the point and I was like, wouldn't you want somebody get footage of that? And she said that her stalker has a camera jammer. A camera jammer. A camera jammer. And if you have me on Snapchat, I put up a story that day and I was just like talking about the camera jammer, like what the fuck? And my boss literally burst out laughing and she was like, a camera jammer? What is a camera jammer? And the lady was like,
you can look it up. You can get it on Amazon. Like, look it up.
and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna look this up. And I picked up my phone and I went to Amazon because that's where she said you could get it from. And I looked up camera jammer, and the things I found were not camera jammers. I don't think that there's such thing as a camera jammer. If there is, it's not available to the public. Otherwise, crime would be rampant because people would have camera jammers and just jam the fucking cameras. So the things I found were like things that could detect camera signals and like radio signals and stuff like that, but nothing to jam a camera. Camera jammer. We finally got her to like leave the office. So she comes back in and she's also talking about how she's trying to tell us that the parking lot is her private space and she doesn't want to be monitored in her private space. And we keep trying to get her to understand that the only private space that she has is inside of her apartment. You lease the inside of your apartment, not the outside of your apartment. The outside of your apartment is common area. It's public to the other residents. It's public to anybody who drives in here. It's not your own private space. People are allowed to have their cameras because their cars and stuff are parked out there. They're allowed to monitor that. That's not your private space. And she keeps trying to like harp on this fact that the parking lot is her own private space and she doesn't want to be recorded in it. And we had to like look up the law and like show her the law where it says any space outside of her home is not private space. Like, she can be recorded anywhere. And so we're like, look, the cameras are not recording any sound. We're not picking up any of your conversations, not saving any conversations that you're having. The camera is not looking into your home. Like, we can't see into your private home. It's your privacy is in your apartment. Outside of the apartment is not private. But even so, the camera's not pointed at your front door. It is literally out into the parking lot. That fucking craziness happened. And then she started disturbing her neighbors below her in other ways. The downstairs neighbors have like a babysitter that comes over and babysits her kids while they're at work. And we keep getting complaints that all throughout the day, there's like constant banging and screaming and like throwing things and just like crazy shit that happens all throughout the day, all into the night. And we have designated quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. where, you know, you can't make excessive noise. And so people like to take that and say that outside of quiet hours, that means they can do anything that you want. No, that's not the case. Like, I go over that in the lease with everybody. I'm like, there's a particular emphasis between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. But outside of those times, you still have to be respectful of your neighbors. You're allowed to live in your apartment, but if you make excessive fucking noise and people are complaining about you, it's gonna be an issue, okay? Because everybody has like different schedules. Some people work from home, and you know, if you've got people that are staying at home and just being crazy and throwing things and stomping all over the place and like just being loud and shit, it's gonna disturb you. And so we just served her a 10-day notice the other day, because if you live in an apartment complex or somewhere where you have neighbors and you're trying to get your landlord to do something about, you need to be very detailed and specific and have it in writing. It doesn't matter if you think it's gonna bother your landlord, like, we need this information. Dates, times, specifics of what's happening, send a quick email as soon as it's happening, so that we have that record, we have that paper trail, so that we can be like, look, we have all of these specific complaints, things about you, because otherwise it's just hearsay. So there's a little word of advice to you, like, document shit like crazy. You're not gonna annoy the landlord, and even if you do, it doesn't matter. You need to be able to live in your fucking home. They're causing noise to the point where like the stomping and shit shakes the light fixtures, and like a picture fell off the wall or something, and like so fucking excessive. So we've got that crazy bitch. Crazy number two, this fucking lady. We leased an apartment to this guy who has 2 Great Danes, and he leased the apartment that's above this lady. The first night that he moved in, you know, they're getting settled and everything, and the dogs are a little nervous, so maybe they moved around a little bit, but he has like crates and stuff for them, and they're Great Danes. Great Danes are typically pretty chill, like they just sit and lounge around. Like, even though they're huge and you wouldn't think that they're good apartment dogs, Great Danes are good apartment dogs. Like, they just want to sit and chill, okay? This guy has pet cams and he monitors them, and like, so we know that they really don't bark that much. So the first night that this guy moves in, the dogs are getting used to their new surroundings, and then also apparently the guy had a girl over and they were having sex for a little bit, and apparently it disturbed the neighbor below. This bitch snapped, yelling and hollering about this guy and how we let him have horse dogs and they're so loud, and she was just screaming all night long because they were fucking and all this bullshit, and she couldn't sleep. And we, you know, got the story from the guy as well, and his end of the story is that, yeah, he had somebody over, but they didn't feel like they were really that loud, and it didn't last that long. This lady took it upon herself to retaliate the next night. So she waited until it was close to quiet hours, and she started banging pots and pans, opening and shutting her sliding glass door, just like slamming it, slamming all sorts of doors in her apartment, and howling like a dog. So then, you know, we get the complaint from the new guy, and he is like a nurse, so he sees mentally unstable people quite a lot, and he was like, that bitch is straight up crazy. Like, she was standing at her front door, and she like claims that the girl that he had over like came down and threatened her, which did not fucking happen. The girl that he brought over is a cop, so she complained because the girl is like a cosplayer, so she was like in full like costume for whatever the fuck, I don't know what it was. So she's like trying to say that she's crazy and stuff. She was like, I'm gonna move out, whatever, and she like never gave us her written notice, and we kept trying to get it from her. So we're like, all right, you're going month to month, which is market plus 150. She was giving us all sorts of hell and like wouldn't pay her full amount of rent, and we're like giving her 3-day notices to vacate because she's not paying her rent, and she's threatening us with like her attorney and shit. And she comes into the office one day when I was just there on the weekend, and she looked steaming mad, like she wanted to like yell at my boss, but my boss wasn't there, and so I was able to calm her down. She was complaining about all the noise. She said there's constant noise all the time. And I was like, look, we want to be able to help you, but we can't help you unless you give us like specifics. Like, we need the documentation, we need dates, times, and what's happening so that we can help you, but otherwise we can't. And then she lets it slip that ever since the first night and the retaliation, she hasn't been staying in her apartment. So for a month, The whole time that this guy has lived here, she has not been staying in her apartment. She went to stay with somebody else, and she says that she feels like she's being forced out of her home. So she's basing all of this crazy shit on one night, on the very first night. She hasn't stayed in the apartment since then, and she claims that he is super loud and noisy and with his horse dogs all the time. So when she said that she hasn't been staying there for a month, I was like, excuse me, you haven't been at your apartment for a month? You haven't stayed in your apartment for a month? And she was like, yeah, I've been staying with a friend. I was like, okay, so how do you know that all of this is still going on if you haven't been at your apartment? And she like didn't know how to fucking answer me. And I was like, how about you stay in your apartment, and you know, if there's actual noise going on, you document it and send it to us. We have yet to hear anything about that. She's still on her like a little month, but she was like, when my attorney gets back from vacation in Arizona, like blah, 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 blah. But you know, we still haven't heard from her fucking attorney. And she's got this like huge sob story where she says she feels like she's being forced out of her apartment because we let 2 horse dogs stay above her, and like, we don't give a shit about her. And I'm like, lady, we want to help you, but you're being fucking crazy. You were howling and banging pots and pans, and you haven't stayed in the apartment for a month, yet you claim that he's making all this noise, but you haven't lived there the entire time that he has been in the apartment. So how can you fucking say that? At the other community that I worked at in Texas, I worked at 2 different communities, but the first one, the one where my stalker was, so my stalker was absolutely crazy. Please watch that video so you can learn about all of that bullshit. But also, we had a few just like, what the fuck people live in there. This one fucking lady, oh, this fucking lady, she was a hot mess from the beginning. Like when she came in, like the first time I met her, like I give people the benefit of the doubt all the time, because I'm like, I don't know what you're going through. You could be having a bad day. You could be hungover right now, and that's why you look a hot mess and you smell like beer, whatever. Like, I don't judge, it's fine. I just want to make sure I'm communicating to you clearly and that you understand what you're getting yourself into. So this bitch, I leased an apartment to her. I'm like, I'm very thorough with everything that I explain to her. I've got everything in writing. I tell her what she needs on the day of move-in. She's very hard to reach via email, and her phone like isn't a real number that works, or it's cut off or something. I don't fucking know. So it's really hard to get a hold of her. Her day of move-in, she came in 10 minutes before close. She hadn't had her lease signed, because that place we worked at, you could sign your lease online and you would do it before you moved in. So she didn't have her lease signed, so she came into the office and I had to set her up on the computer and like walk her. She's maybe a couple of years older than me. She was completely computer illiterate, and I had to walk her through every single fucking step, which I get people not knowing how to use technology, but it was so fucking frustrating. Like there's a 70-year-old man that lives here that can use a computer better than she can. And it took her an hour and a half to sign the lease, and she was reading every single line, which I appreciate you reading the lease. Like, please read things that you are going to sign and ask questions. But this was supposed to be done before you moved in, and you showed up 10 minutes before we closed. And so I was there for over an hour after we fucking closed because you like didn't do this fucking thing. She didn't have her renter's insurance, which I communicated with her multiple times, like, hey, we need your renter's insurance, make sure you have your renter's insurance, I need you to send this. And she was like, I didn't know that I needed to have that. And I was like, yes, you did. She didn't have her money with her to move in, and so I had to wait for her to go get money orders and come back. And so it's like 2 hours past closing, and I finally get done with this bitch. And then she immediately starts causing problems. So she rented a 1-bedroom, and she was the only person on the lease, but immediately, and like there's a place in the lease about unauthorized occupants, and like if you want to put somebody else on your lease, that is fine, but they need to apply and be added to the lease via a roommate addendum. You can't just have people who aren't qualified to live here live in your fucking apartment. Doesn't work like that. She's in this 1-bedroom, and immediately she starts causing all sorts of problems. She has let her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend move in, and they've been like living with her in her new apartment, in her 1-bedroom apartment. And I was getting the golf cart one day, and I was driving around property, like going to open up the models, and I drive past her building, and she was on the 3rd floor, and I look up and I just noticed like the patio just looks really weird. I was like, what the hell is up with the patio? Like, it looked like the window was like black and like melted. I had no idea what the fuck was going on. And so when I got to the office, my boss was like, oh my God. So this bitch and her unauthorized occupants, apparently her best friend's boyfriend was like terrorizing her. So he would take a shower and then walk around the apartment naked, and she like asked him to stop doing that. And so he, being the asshole that he was, took a shower and then started chasing her around the apartment naked, trying to touch her with his dick. She started freaking out and screaming and telling him to get the fuck out. And in retaliation, he got mad, picked up his girlfriend's clothes, put them on the patio, and set them on fire. Just set that shit on fire. So she lived there for a week and she had already caused a fire. And then we were having issues with her not paying her rent, and so we were like issuing her notices, and she kept saying that she wasn't going to pay the late fees. And she came in and she was trying to pay her rent for October, which it's December at this time. She owes 2+ months of rent, plus she hadn't paid her deposit. We had made an agreement with her where she could make payments on her deposit. She hadn't done that, and so we're like filing eviction on her, and she comes in with her mom on speakerphone trying to like talk about how we're harassing her and stuff. We won't accept her money because she was bringing in money orders for like the baseline amount of rent, not any of the deposits, that she signed a written payment schedule that she would pay, just the base rent for 2 months ago. And she's like, I want this to pay for October's rent. And we're like, no, we need the full October, November, December rent that you have not fucking paid yet. We need the deposits. We need all of this bullshit that you have not given us yet. She's dumb as fuck. I could not explain to you how stupid this bitch was. And she's like, we had to take her to court, and we finally got possession of the apartment and like evicted her. So she was in the apartment for 3 months, and we got the fuck rid of her because she was just fucking crazy. She would show up all the time with beer in her hand, and she was just like visibly hungover or drunk all the fucking time. Bitch was a hot ass mess. And she tried to tell us that we had to accept October's rent. I'm like, we don't have to accept any rent after the 1st of the month. And if you're coming in and you don't have your full balance, we're not accepting your fucking rent. So that lady was fucking crazy. Just like within the first week, had 2 unauthorized occupants, and one of them set fire to her apartment after chasing her around the apartment with his dick. So there's that one. And then we had this other lady, which my boss leased the apartment to, and oh man, so there was all sorts of issues. I went through 3 different managers in the like year that I was at that property. Like the first one that was there was only there for the first week that I worked there, and then she got like transferred to another property or like promoted or something, and so she was like checked out, and I was new to the industry. I like went into her office. I was like, hey, how do you do this thing? And she was just like, figure it out. And I was like, okay. And so she left, and then we got this new manager, and she like came in guns a-blazing, making sure that we knew she was the boss or whatever. And she liked to be very controlling about things, but she wasn't very organized, and she was kind of a bitch. And so she had all these like standards for us to like follow, which you know, I'm a rule follower. I do that. So everything that I did was like, my files were perfect. I made sure I have everybody, like, it's on the up and up, right? And I did any of the crazy shit that she asked me to do. So she leased the apartment to this fucking person, and she didn't go through any of the process. Like the screening had come back that she was denied. She approved them. She manually approved them despite them being denied. She didn't get any of the proof of income. She didn't collect any deposits or anything. So like they hadn't paid any fucking money at all. I handled the rest of it to like get them moved in and everything. But ultimately I was like, you know what? This is on her. If anybody asks me questions about it, it's like she leased the apartment. She's the one that approved. Like those are her initials. Like I can't do anything. That's my manager, whatever. And this fucking bitch was so crazy. She was Andrea from 411. Oh my fucking God. This fucking bitch. So she also had a bunch of unauthorized occupants. She leased a 3-bedroom apartment, and there was only supposed to be 3 people living in the apartment, and then there was like 9 people living in the apartment, and they were constantly smoking weed all the time, which in Texas, it's illegal. We got complaints about that. After they moved in, all of a sudden packages started disappearing from front doors, and like this one kid that like lived with them, he would like pace the entire property, and like I would see him go through the pool area like so many times throughout the day, because like my desk, I could see into the pool area, and he was like constantly, he was on the other side of the property one time, which is where I lived, and he was like walking around. I was like, you have no business being over there, like why are you over there? And they were stealing packages. When we finally filed the writ on them and we got into their apartment after they were evicted, we found tons of boxes in their apartment that were addressed to other people, and there was another lady that was doing that as well. So whenever they moved in, we issued them a card to get into the gate. We gave them 1 per person, so they had 3 of the fucking things because there was 3 people on the lease, and you know, they all had one. And I get a phone call one day, and I picked up the phone. I was like, thank you for calling, my name is Rachel, how may I help you? And she goes, how am I supposed to get in the gate? Didn't introduce herself, didn't say anything other than, how am I supposed to get in the gate? And I was just like, I knew who it was immediately, but I was just like, I'm sorry, who is this? And she's like, it's Andrea from 411, how am I supposed to get in? And I was like, well, we gave you the gate card to get in, so you just put it on the sensor. She's like, I ain't get one of those. And I was like, no, you got 3 of those. And then she just kept arguing with me. She's like, how am I supposed to get in? Like, how am I supposed to get in? I'm not exaggerating. That's how she spoke. So I was like, look, just back up to the keypad and put this code in, and then I can let you in manually, but you need your card or whatever. And then she like hung up on me, and she never did the code. Apparently somebody else like opened the gate. They had a remote, and so she was able to get in. And that situation happened like 3 different fucking times, where I would answer the phone and she'd go, how am I supposed to get? She would never introduce herself. She would always just have this angry, like, how am I supposed to do this? Whatever, blah, 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 blah. Caused all sorts of problems, had 9 people living in her apartment. It took us 3 months to get her evicted, and we finally got her out. Then, about 4 months later, Andrea from 411 comes walking into the apartment, looking all nice, wanting a tour of the facilities, and I was like, you have lived here already before. And she was like, what? No, I haven't. Like, she didn't speak like how she spoke before, and she was like, no, I haven't. I've never been here in my life. I was like, your name is Andrea, right? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, you've lived here. And she like showed me her ID, and I looked her up in the system, and I turned it around. I was like, you have lived here before. Turns out she's a twin, and her twin sister used her identity to get this apartment and got her evicted. And she was so pissed off, and she like called her sister, and she was like yelling at her and telling her all this crap. It was like, what are the fucking chances of her walking into the same place that her crazy ass sister just got evicted from? Like, that was fucking nuts to me. And I was just like, how the hell did that fucking happen, dude? She was a hoot and a holler, but it's Andrea from 411. How am I supposed to get in? There's never a dull moment in property management. It is my favorite job that I've ever fucking had. Like, you get the perfect mix of like, I get to, you know, dress up in business casual, which I like to wear dresses and wear makeup and have my hair down and smell good and not like a restaurant. Get to sit at a desk and do office work, but I also get to get up and like, you know, go around the property, and I get social interaction, but not like over the top, and I don't have to kiss people's asses because this is like, they're signing a contract. This isn't me like depending on your tip or anything. Like, I get paid. It's nice. I love it so fucking much. And there's so many wild things that happen that give me all these awesome stories that I just get to laugh about and share with y'all. There was another chick who moved into the apartment below me. She was a stripper, which no shade to any strippers, like, that's, do what you fucking want, all right? But this bitch was crazy. So when she came in and talked about the apartments, first of all, she's another one of those, like, I had to speak slowly and use like layman's terms and explain shit to her over and over and over and over, because she just, in one ear out the other, couldn't understand it. She led off with, my sugar daddy is gonna be paying for the apartment. And I was like, okay. And she was like, is that all right? I'm like, look, we don't care where the money comes from as long as you pay your rent on time every month. You really don't need to tell me that. We finally got her approved through a very painstaking process. and she moved into the apartment directly below me, and the ratchetry that ensued. She would constantly have all of her unsavory friends over, and they would sit out on the balcony, which the place that we lived in, you could hear a fly fart through the fucking wall. Like, it was shitty. The courtyard where our balconies face, like, there was like 3 buildings that faced it, so it was very, very echoey, and we had quiet hours, you know, and they would sit out on the patio starting at like midnight to like 3 o'clock in the morning, like being super loud, having very vulgar conversations. And like, I'm trying to sleep. I have to get up and be at work at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was driving me fucking insane. And they're out there talking about dildos, talking about meth, talking about all sorts of drugs, and just being loud and fucking crazy. And I had to finally fucking shush them. She brought bed bugs into the apartment, and so I had to have my apartment treated, and she had to have, you know, her apartment. We had to like treat a whole section of the building because she brought bed bugs into the apartment, and she was trying to tell us that it was our fault. But it wasn't our fault. There were no bed bugs in that apartment. We had them inspected before. No, it was your fault, bitch. And she would like come into the office and be crazy and yell at us about how the bed bugs were all our fault and she's not paying for the treatment. And we're like, no, it's your fault, whatever. We eventually had to evict her because she like was late on her rent and she like wouldn't pay, and she was just being fucking obnoxious. But like, my memory is really bad, so I can't remember all the crazy details. Just, she was a fucking mess, dude. She worked at a strip club. She was one of the daytime strippers. So, you know, like a Monday morning, I wouldn't get a lap dance from her. She was really gross. And I'm fine with strippers, all right? Strippers are cool. I've been to a strip club before, had a lap dance from this beautiful, just amazing smelling bitch. Like, oh my God, she smelled so good and she was so hot, and that was a good ass time, okay? I appreciate strippers and the female form and all of that. I would not want her to get anywhere near me. She looked like she'd been on meth for like all of her life. She was fucked up. And she just, you know, had all her crazy drug friends over all the time. Also had unauthorized occupants, would have super loud sex. Those are a few of the stories that I can remember. I'm sure more will pop into my head, but working in property management is really fucking fun, and you encounter a lot of interesting folks. If you want to hear these stories happen in real time, I encourage you to add me on Snapchat, because I do post on there way more often than I post to any of my other social media, and I only post when I have like a story to fucking tell, and like as it happens, so you get my like energy and all the details, because it's like right in that fucking moment I'm telling it. So my Snapchat is the same name as my YouTube channel. It's Dickle Tickle. Add me on there. I will add you back, and yeah, experience it as it happens. So yeah, fucking subscribe to me, you know? I'm just here chilling. It's a good ass time. Bye-bye now.